Hi, thanks for joining me here on the Journey to Handmade podcast. I'm Erin, and I will be talking with you about my adventures of trying to create a handmade wardrobe and a handcrafted home for myself and for my family. I'm so glad you're with me today. I am so thrilled to be able to share that I finished a project in the last 2 weeks, and I have it here in my project bag I talked about last week. This is my project piece shawl by Christina Campbell. And to be totally honest, I still need to weave in the ends and block it. However, I'm counting it as finished because I finished knitting it. And for me with two little ones, that's quite an accomplishment. So I think I had shown you in episode 1, I had a little bit done. If you can see my little turtle place marker here, that's about as much as I had done when we chatted about it before. And then I had put it away because I'm trying to focus on one project at a time for knitting specifically, just to help me actually complete projects. Otherwise, I have a tendency to keep starting new ones, and then I have a pile up of works in progresses, but they're not really active because I'm not working on them. So, but I did finish my project piece shawl. So you can see it's got these really pretty ripples at the edge, and I think it turned out really lovely. It was interesting. If you notice, the colors changed quite drastically, and it is all the same colorway. It's from Malabrigo. You can see all the detailed notes in episode 1. I talk about that. But each skein came and was very different, even though it was the same colorway. So I had a very light, mild skein come that was just very muted colors. And then it ranged all the way to a very dark, bold, violet, dark green, some brown, some gold in it. And I do like, I think for a shawl, it turned out beautifully because you can I knitted from the dark, actually start up here. So I knitted from the light to the medium skein to the dark skein. And it just makes it a little more gradiated in the boldness, which I think it's really pretty. If I had a sweater, I don't know that I would want to knit with this yarn, because I think even if you were to interchange the yarns and try to like knit 1 or 2 rows of one and then knit 1 or 2 rows of another, I think the colors would end up being still pretty drastic as they change. But that's just my personal preference. So anyway, I thought it was really pretty for a shawl. So it's very, very silky and soft. And I have sensitive skin, so it's hard for me to wear a lot of the animal fibers without feeling itchy. And this one is merino and silk, and I have so far not experienced a problem with it. So that's very cool. So I'm going to teach myself how to wet block this week, and I can let you know how that goes on our next episode. I kind of cheat usually when I'm blocking my garments. My mom got me a really fancy steam iron, and it's featured for quilting, really, I think is the circle she found it in. But what makes it unique is the plate on the bottom doesn't really get hot, so it won't melt anything. And so you can iron on a lot of things that typically can't be ironed, and yarn is one of them. So it doesn't give it a silky shine. You know how sometimes if you use a regular iron and you press something, you'll get that silky kind of sheen to it, especially, the more what's the word for it? Either a more delicate fabric or one that has maybe more of the synthetic fibers in it. But when you use it on a knit garment, it just presses it really nice, and it does the equivalent of blocking without having to soak and block. But I have been hearing more about wet blocking lately, and I thought I would give it a go and see if I end up with a different outcome or something that convinces me to wet block instead of iron in the future. So, well, it's not really ironing, it's steam pressing, I suppose. But anyway, so that'll be that. And I have another finished project. Last time I made my large project bag, this one here, and it was perfect, but it was supposed to be for a sweater, and it's definitely not large enough to put a sweater project in. So I went ahead and I tried upsizing it, and I made myself a jumbo project bag. So again, this is the Riley Blake cosmetic bag pattern. It's free, and I just upsized it. So you can check on my blog, journeytohandmade.com, and if you're interested, I have the modifications on there for how I upsized it. I do think it's perfect for a very large project. So perhaps if you are knitting up a really large cardigan or something, a blanket, this would be a perfect project bag. But it did end up bigger than I wanted for a sweater. So I've had too small and I've had too big. I think I might have to make myself a third project bag just to see how it turns out. For example, you can see in here, it looks like there's still some empty space in there. And I have a mittens project, 6 skeins of yarn, and my sweater I'm working on, and my Chalgu interchangeable needles case. And there's still ample room. Lately I've been throwing in books and other stuff just because I can. So I upsized it to 21 inches wide. I think if I were to do 16 or 17 inches wide, it would make it more this size. That would probably be appropriate for just a sweater. So I think I'll give it another go. I used 4 fat quarters for it, and you can see I've got Moda up here, and there's this Riley Blake down here. They've come out with a whole line of neutrals and kind of solids, but they've got this little pattern on them, so I think that's really pretty. And then I've got more Moda on the inside. And down on the bottom there you can see my 4th fat quarter was just a random, random one from my stash. So I like how it turned out. I do have to say, with my smaller one, I used a heavy fusible interfacing, and I thought it worked really, really well. And it's got a nice durability to it, but it's still kind of a squishy, soft bag. This one I tried the Heat and Bond, which is what was recommended in the pattern. I've never worked with it before, and if I'm totally honest, I think unless I'm going to try to waterproof something in the future, I'm not going to use it again. It was very plasticky and tacky, and I found it difficult to work with. And what ended up happening, and you can see over here, one of my mistakes is you have to press it on, and it heats and it melts, but because it's kind of plasticky, here it ended up creating a bit of a crease, and I just can't get it out now because it's a lot of plastic in there. So if you're about to make one and it's for knitting, I would suggest a heavy interfacing. I wouldn't do anything more than that. So my 3rd project, I can't show you because it's across the room and I can't get it up into the camera. But my 3rd thing that I worked on this week is I fixed up my spinning wheel. So I have a spinning wheel I bought off of Craigslist when I was living in Seattle. And it has assorted parts. Some things were old, some things were missing. And this particular one had leather connecting a lot of the pieces, and the leather had gotten dry and brittle because she hadn't been caring for it. And so I had to retie the treadle to the wheel so that when I pedal it, it'll move the parts. And then the other thing that was wrong is there's a string, the tension string that connects the wheel to the bobbin and the whorl so that it will spin it. And my cats got to it. Honestly, it was a couple of years ago, so that shows you how much spinning I've done recently. And they fortunately didn't eat it, but they did chew through it, so it was no longer functional. So what I did is I took number 10 crochet cotton, and I used that. And I've had to do that in the past before because it's not the first time that that's happened. And it's working great now. So I'm really excited because this week I hope to put a spinning project on the wheel. I would love, 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 love to learn how to spin really fine yarn, which is sock yarn. And hence why you'll see behind me, I've gone to the library and I'm checking out some different books. This one was recommended by Dunkelgrün, and it sounded really good. So the Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs, which is interesting, it has how to make all types of yarn, and it's almost like recipes, like spin, a yarn this wide, this direction, with beads, with no beads, all of that. And then I also am checking out some like spin control. I thought, I can pick up, I'm very much a beginner. I've spun 2 projects before, and they came out very, I think very pretty, but I'm not sure how to use them because there isn't a reliable gauge to it. I don't think gauge is the right word. Sorry, I haven't had coffee yet today. But there isn't a reliable width. You can't say, oh, it's fingering weight or it's worsted weight. It's very much, in parts it's super bulky and in parts it's fingering. So I need to work on that. But that's how you learn, right? Is by practicing. So anyway, that's going to be something I'll work on this week. So for my works in progress, I actually have only one active work in progress. If you follow me on my blog, you know that I do actually have about 24 works in progress on my hands. And that's because for a long while, what I've done is I've been inspired. And so I start a project and then I work on it for a little bit and then I get new inspiration. So I start a new project. And then before I know it, I have a ton of unfinished projects on my hand. So that's why this year, you'll notice I'm trying to limit my works in progress so that it's not so overwhelming. Because once you start getting a ton of projects on your hands, then it becomes hard to focus on them. And when you have free time, it's hard, for me at least, to know what I want to work on. So my one work in progress right now is a knitting project. And it's my light ease sweater by Alicia Plummer. And I love how it's turning out. I tried it on last night and it fits so well. It's raglan, so right here there's a bit of excess bulk. And to be honest, I did think about ripping it out, and I actually talked to one of my knitting friends about it. My only concern is I don't actually know how to change the pattern to make that fit better. So in the future, I think that's something I'm going to want to learn. If that's something you know how to do, I would love it if you want to share with me. But this is the sweater and how it's coming along. So I love it. Since you've seen it last, let's see. Where is, oh, here it is. Okay, so it was here when you saw it last. And so I've since put my sleeves on placeholders and I've knit quite a bit. I still have, I'd say, 6 inches or so to go in the body, but it's really quick knitting and it's easy. And the hardest thing about it is this Pima cotton by Cascade just is really shiny and does show every stitch perfectly. So if you get a little absent-minded and you're not thinking about your tension, or if you're someone where you sit down, and I've noticed, like, if I'm stressed, I'll knit tighter, and if I'm relaxed, I'll knit a little looser. And those subtle changes in tension do show in this yarn. So I do have to be very mindful of that. But otherwise, it's just knitting around and around and around and around, and I really enjoyed working on it. So I'm very excited to see how that comes along. And yeah, so that's my one work in progress. Now, I do have a game plan, which I wanted to share with you, because if you're like me and you have a lot of hopes and dreams for this year and what you want to create, and I know I've seen on Ravelry, they have that ultimate challenge to set goals for yourself, and on Instagram, people have been doing the 9 for the year, and then you show you're the featured 9. So if you're interested in any of those sorts of things, I have come up with a game plan that's working for me so far. It's only January, but what I've done is I have a lot of goals, and I wanted to see just how much I hoped to create, because sometimes I'm a bit of a dreamer, not too realistic. So I went ahead and I did a brain dump, and I put all of my project hopes and dreams out on paper and counted them up, and there were quite a bit. And then what I did is I sorted them. And so for each month of the year, what I've done is I've assigned myself a garment that I want to make. I have left a lot of them open so that as I am inspired down the road in the year, I'm able to change and have some flexibility with that. But there's enough structure that it kind of keeps me on track towards having a handmade wardrobe and some of my other household goals that I'm hoping to accomplish this year. So a garment and then a quilting project. I have quite a few that are nearly complete, so that's not as daunting as it sounds. So that'll be nice. And then an item for the house, because again, there's some little woodworking projects and tasks that I hope to get to, but if it's not written down, I forget about them or they just don't happen. And then the last one is a gift. So every month I'm working on a garment, a quilt, an item for the house, and a gift. Now, some of them, it sounds like a lot. Some of them are very small, like there's a meals board that I want to paint, and you attach little clips to it so you can put your recipe cards on it for what you're going to make each night. And I thought, I like the way that looks. There's a bunch on Pinterest. So some are easy like that. They're not all sweaters. Pardon me. yeah, so that's that update. And the last part of the show is where I talk about things I've been discovering. My word of the year is discover, and I thought, what better way to discover things than to go and then share your discoveries, because perhaps it'll be something that interests you or challenges you. And some of it is knowledge, some of it is things I've done, and all of that. So one of my biggest, big discoveries is there is a word that describes people who are doing what I hope to do, which is to have a handmade wardrobe and to predominantly cook my own food, grow my own produce, make furniture, all of that kind of rustic in my world, in my mind, like pioneering sort of person. And the word is called homesteading, and I had no idea. So I'm very excited because I can now look more into something that I guess when you put a term to something, it helps you make a more formulated idea of what you're really going after. So I'm excited to be able to go to the library and kind of dig into what other people have done with that, and maybe find some blogs and such about that. So that'll be exciting. And then the other thing that I've been learning about a lot this week, and I'm really getting into, is the idea of natural dyeing. I've always thought it would be really neat to dye my own fibers, and I've never known how. And the one thing I had heard was with acid dyes, you have to have the mask on, and stuff like that just got me really nervous, especially with me having two little ones with me all the time. So I haven't really pursued it. And then I was listening to a podcast by Dunkelgruen, and she was talking about natural dyes, and she was showing some of her yarns, and they have the most beautiful colors, and some of them are really bold and vibrant, and I was just awestruck. I've never seen something like that before. So I have, again, love my library. I've been checking out a bunch of books on natural dyeing. So The Modern Natural Dyer, Wild Color, Harvesting Color, and I'm going to be reading them and taking notes and kind of making a game plan. So there's some things that I think I can find in my yard or near me. There's some things I've come across that could easily be planted in my garden this year with a little bit of planning. And there's others where I think I'm going to do a dye swap with a friend in a different part of the country, because she has different leaves and trees and plants than we have here, because it's geography. So I'm very excited to learn about that. And yeah, it's just a whole new world. I will let you know as I read the books if there's one that's really fantastic that if you're interested in this, you might want to check out or purchase. I think what I usually do is I rent about 50 or so books on whatever topic I'm trying to learn about from the library, and just dive in. And then I come out with 5 or 6 favorites. And in this case, I think I might go and purchase some of my favorites when I'm all done with it. But I will keep you posted. And then the final thing that I've been learning about in the last 2 weeks and discovering more about related to yarns and fibers is the idea of fiber consciousness. And I don't know if if you have heard about this or have any resources about it. I would love it if you comment me, message me. You can find me on Instagram, my blog, on Ravelry, all of the places I'm Journey to Handmade. So feel free to send resources and suggestions my way. But it's a world I'm just starting to discover and get into. And the idea comes about with thinking about where your fiber comes from. And for me, that would be not just my yarns, but also my textiles that I'm using to sew. One of the reasons I got into wanting to make my own stuff in the first place is because I suppose it was back in college, I heard a number of lectures about how goods that are produced for us, usually the more affordable, cheaper ones, tend to have the possibility of being produced in ways that are either very harmful to the environment or that aren't really in line with my ethical and moral values. So sometimes using child labor or slave labor or just really inhumane working conditions. And so that was an idea that had come up in college, but as I didn't really have place or thing to do with it. Except there were some companies I came across that my husband and I decided we'll just not support those companies, so we won't purchase their products. And then haven't looked more into it, and I watched a documentary a year ago on Netflix, and it was about fast fashion and how fast fashion is this idea in America, and I suppose it might be in other parts of the world too, where they're changing the fashion trends so much and everything's so cheap, and so people are just going and they're buying, and there's all of this extra load of textiles that are being produced, and it's really more than our earth and our culture can sustain, and so it gets sent to third world countries. And it's actually interesting because when it mentioned that, my husband and I did live in Africa. We were in Malawi for 6 months when we first got married, and we totally saw this, where we went to the market, and on market days in our village there would be just mounds, and they would be tall as a human, just mounds of clothes, and they were worn things. It was like a goodwill heap in the bush of Africa. And so, but of course then whatever they can't use, there's nowhere else for it to go, so then it just kind of sits there. So I found a lot of that unsettling, and that's why I wanted to start making my own clothes and start just kind of slowing our family down to what we need and what can meet our needs, and not needing the excess, and being more simple. And so now there's this idea that I've come across of where we're even sourcing our materials for that from. So our yarns and the fabrics and all of that. So I'm very excited to engage this more and discover more about it. And if, like I said, if there's any of you that are watching that have information about this or resources, or could point me to someone who has gone further in this journey than I currently am, I'm very interested in discovering more about it and just being intentional with the resources. So I do know there's some companies that I've already come across from living in the Pacific Northwest that do align better with the sustainable, ethical sourcing, all of that. But I'm looking for more. So I'll stay tuned. I will keep sharing as I discover more and get further into that. But quest, that's what I'm looking for. So anyway, I am so glad you joined me here this week. I hope you have a wonderful time creating and making. And please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can also find me on Instagram and Ravelry and Facebook as Journey to Handmade, as well of course my blog, where I do share photos and stories and other lessons that I'm learning. So it was so great to see you. Bye.